It came up because of an article, um, and a lawsuit that just came out. But let's talk about it. How many love fees? It's like this commercial I see on TV or I hear on the radio all the time. Do you love to pay taxes? Who loves to pay taxes? And nobody does. Same thing about fees. Do you ever find that? You just bought those concert tickets, really excited you're going, and all of a sudden there's a $10 add-on for each ticket that you purchased. That's fun. Um, Say again? Yeah, it's for my convenience. Even for movie theaters, they do that unless you join their movie clubs. Cinemark. Um, Resort fees. There is nothing like negotiating a hotel room in Las Vegas as I'm driving to Southern California to see family, and I get a $35 room, but there's a $50 resort fee that I get to pay at the counter when I'm checking in. That's always fun. Banking fees for overdrafts for ATMs. Um, when I was traveling overseas, something I do love about my credit union is they will cover all of my ATM fees. And so there may be a $2 or $3 surcharge. My credit union will actually cover that ATM fee. Late payment fees. Well, my check was in the mail. Why in the world didn't it get there on time? So you get late payment fees. Those are fun. Termination fees for your internet service provider. You decided to move from, I'll pick two, Verizon to AT&T, and they charge you a separation fee. It's like divorce. Um, Airline baggage fees. You ever notice that you get these super cheap airfares? Oh, you want to choose your seat? There's a fee for that. You want to bring a bag? Oh, we have fees for that. Um, and then my favorite is when you're going, I've already bought my ticket. I know what my price is. And then I have to go select my seats, but I choose a seat. They say, oh no, that's a premium seat. That'll be another 30 or $40. That's exciting. And so then I'm adding on the back here too, real estate fees. There are transaction fees. Now, there are many agents here, and many teams that will say that there's a $4.95 or a $3.95 fee plus X percentage that I'm charging to list or sell your home. That's what the lawsuit's about. The national company is Compass. Not huge in Utah yet, and except for, I want to say Park City area, but Compass is being served with a class action lawsuit. And I promise you it will spread. And so there will be, I'm just going to say, previews of coming attractions. This brokerage has never charged a transaction fee, ever. Now, your team may, you as an individual agent may. Um, we're going to be adding some language to that, just but letting you know about it. This week's newsletter, it'll be coming out Thursday. Take a peek. It's an interesting story, but you are not authorized to say that KW Westfield charges a transaction fee if a title company ever calls you and say, hey, is there a transaction fee for your brokerage? There's not. Now, but again, in your listing agreement, in your buyer broker agreement, you may have one, but that's your fee. That's not my fee. And so we'll be obviously distinguishing that if you choose to do that. Anyway, wanted to give you a heads up because people hate fees. This is one I think will come back to bite a lot of folks. There are brokerages, national brands, that actually charge a fee, and that's for them. It's a revenue generator, and it also works for another one. I had an agent that talked about it. He goes, I charge a $400 fee because that's how I keep my son on a mission. And he says, yep, this one just paid for this month's, and this transaction over here, that paid for next month's. And that's how he was able to cover those fees. Just want you to be careful as you charge fees, because some will see those as junk fees. Does anybody here not use a transaction coordinator? Because I do, but I pay for it every time out of my commissions. Some people say, well, we use a professional transaction coordinator. Well, if I'm paying mine, she's also a professional. Just saying. Anyway, wanted to throw that out. That's all I have for today.
Thank you, Dean, keeping us safe all the way. I'm excited to introduce Tana today. Many of you know her. Tana was a brand new agent when I stepped in as a team leader a couple years ago, almost 5 years ago, which is crazy. And her first year, she sold over $5 million in real estate, had a phenomenal start in the industry, and she has a really cool backstory. I'm sure she'll share a little bit about that. But what's cool is that Tana, year over year, she's grown her business 30 to 50% since 2022. So even though it's been a challenging market, finished last year with 27 closings, which is a phenomenal, awesome year. Give a clap for that. That's awesome. And the topic today is all about mindset. We've talked about this before, where 80% of your success comes from your psychology. Only 10 to 20% comes from the mechanics, the actual strategies that you deploy. And so rather than us having Tana say, what did you do, right, step by step, it's what are some of the beliefs that you had to have to help you have that success. So super excited to have Tana today, and we'll pass the time over to her. Give her a hand.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. All right. Okay. So as I thought about preparing for this, thank you. It's down to switch. Okay. The thought that kept coming to my mind was, why did I agree to do this? But not really. Like, these are always opportunities, I think, just to reflect and to continue to grow. So I am grateful for the chance to talk today, even though this is totally outside of my comfort zone. So once again, it's an opportunity for me to grow. So yeah, like Shoni said, I started in the business right about 5 years ago. Got my license close to 5 years ago. I've been with Keller Williams the entire time I've had my license, and joined the best team right after that. I work on a small team, the Kennedy Group, and this is exactly where I needed to be. So with Keller Williams, I did bold my first year, and we went through the 6 personal perspectives, and that was kind of the foundation at that time. And if you're not super familiar with Keller Williams' 6 personal perspectives, right here, I think we forget often, but I would strongly encourage you to dig into the education resources and kind of go through these, see which, resonates with you, where you're at right now, and how they can help you grow. So just going through them really quick: committing to self-mastery, the 80-20 principle. And then today I'm mainly going to focus on moving from E to P, entrepreneur to purposeful. And then we have be learning-based, remove your limiting beliefs, and be accountable versus victim mentality. So that's some pretty good groundwork, right? Some good foundation. So with real estate, this is something that has really, I've had to have this total mindset change just about what I could expect out of life and myself in the 5 years that I've been in real estate. So it's been a total mindset shift for me. But that's like over 5 years, but it's also on a weekly and daily basis sometimes, right? So I'm focusing a little bit more on moving from E to P, but I've put a little spin on that with moving from survival to entrepreneur as well. Because I feel like that's more like where I started and came from. And I think a lot of us do, or all of us do, in our own way, shape, or form, right? So, and that's kind of where we have to be careful of where we slip back to. And I think a lot of those things that we've learned from our past experiences have served us at certain times in our lives and our business, but then we slip back, right? And those things that served us in the beginning might not be serving us as we move forward and as we grow. So kind of the title that I went with today is The Beliefs That Built You May Be Holding You Back. And as I was preparing for this and just kind of thinking about it, over the last 6 months or so, there was kind of a repeating theme. Like every podcast I listened to or anything that resonated with me kind of had this repeating theme. And the theme was examining our beliefs. And so the One Thing podcast, Nariel, who's the author of Beyond Belief, that podcast was really impactful to me. Jody Moore is another podcast I listen to. And then John Vandergainst, who is a MAPS coach. And they all had these repeating themes, examining our beliefs. And so I want to just ask everybody too, like, have you ever had a situation where you thought, once I get here, I'll be happy and I'll be content. Once I make enough money, once I have that relationship, once I've reached this goal, I'll be happy and I'll be satisfied. Only to reach that goal and find maybe you were still discontent, dissatisfied, maybe even unsettled. Like, has anybody ever had that experience? So I'm like, I have, and that's something that's kind of can be on repeat in our lives, right? And I thought my biggest obstacles were money, opportunity, education, the market. And looking back, many of my biggest obstacles were actually beliefs that I never questioned, like truths that I never questioned, because those were my truths based on my perspective. So remembering, and something that's been helpful for me is remembering that growth isn't just about moving forward, it's about learning why we move backwards. So just being super self-aware too on why we move backwards. And the first step in moving forward isn't necessarily a new strategy, a new script. It's a willingness to examine the lens that we've been looking through. And the one that feels very familiar, you may have forgotten that it's even there, right? Sometimes we forget that we're looking through the lens of life like this little pinhole, and there's all of this that we can't see. So yeah, just sometimes, beliefs that served me in the past were the beliefs that actually pulled me back. And one thing too, like recognizing like our brains don't like questioning our beliefs. Our brains don't like to question what we know or think to be true. That's like being told you're wrong, right? Even when you're asking yourself that question, none of us like to be told we're wrong or to, think that what we've thought all along, could be wrong or skewed in some way. So just to kind of share a little bit about, we're talking about beliefs. So I want to share a little bit about like where I came from and where my beliefs came from. And so I share a lot of this, not so like you get to know me better and get to know my story, but so you can kind of reflect on your own story and maybe where some of your skills or your beliefs or your truths have come from. So where I came from, my mom was pregnant with me by the time she was 16, and then had my two little sisters, and then her and my dad divorced by the time I was 7. My mom struggled with alcoholism, addiction, health issues, and so I was the oldest, so I was raising my little sisters. We, to this day, still have a more of a mother-daughter relationship than a sister relationship. But so raising my sisters, we were raised on welfare. That's kind of how we survived. We were homeless a couple of times, not living on the streets, but we were put up in a hotel by family members a couple of times, lived with friends of my mom. And so it was just always like what was right in front of me, right? What my sisters needed, what we needed, what was going to be for dinner or whatever. So yeah, just kind of in that survival mode. And then I also found myself pregnant at 17. So with a guy who was not a good guy, to put it nicely. So there wasn't much room for dreaming, right? So there was room for surviving. And that was something that carried over most of my life. There was no room for dreaming. So thinking big and having a big why and having a big purpose, that felt unreal to me. Like I didn't deserve to think big or have a big purpose or a big why, because I started out so far behind the mark. Like I'm saying these things not because they're like true, but that was my lens, right? Like that was my truth and how I could see things. But as I have here, survival was my superpower. So what I learned during these times that served me and continued to serve me, as I was growing, was resilience. So enduring what felt unendurable, and waking up the next morning. Resourcefulness. Oh, sorry, the spacing was off there. Building something out of nothing and doing it over and over again. Independence, trusting only myself because the alternative felt impossible. So you can see how those were like kind of superpowers, but you can also see how things like trusting only yourself can hold you back later on, right? Persistence, refusing to quit, even when quitting would have been easier. So survival, once again, wasn't my problem, but it was my superpower. And superpowers can eventually become defaults. So when I was pregnant at 17, like there was no question in my mind what I was going to do. I was going to raise this little girl. I was going to take good care of her. Like I was going to do whatever I needed to do. No question in my mind. And that's exactly what I did. I went on to, at different times, I had single mom and had at least one of my little sisters living with me at a time for the next couple of years. And 19-year-old single mom, I met my now husband 27 years ago. And so kind of shifting and focusing on some of these like really good, cool things that came from this, right? So when we met, my daughter was almost 2. My husband's son was 1.5 years. So we have step twins that are they're 28, almost 29 now. And then we have a 22-year-old and our 17-year-old who will be turning 18. And we are starting to embrace the empty nest phase of our lives here because we've never had that. We've never had an empty nest. But yeah, I just want you to think of too. So when I think of some of those things, like those were some of the hardest times of my life, but also some of the, I learned some of the most important lessons of my life too, and things that I've been able to help my kids with, family members, friends. So think of maybe the hardest season of your life and maybe just the hardest time. And then also think of what is something or a skill you learned that got you through or even helped you to maybe reach a goal. So think about that for a minute. If you think of something, that you want to add as you think about that. So the hardest time of your life where you maybe learned something that was able to help you to grow, or a skill that you developed because of it. Okay, and then as I think about that too, so I think we can all think of experiences, hard things that we've gone through where we've learned really valuable things. And so sometimes like survival doesn't need to be fixed. I think we can give gratitude for those times in our lives and the things that we walked away with. But I think we can also kind of say to those times in our lives, like we can say goodbye. We can say like, thank you, but I'm ready to move on. And so, but we do have to remember too, that during those times in our lives, whether it's in our business, our personal lives, the hustle that got us there, like, being willing to work harder than anybody else, make the calls that you didn't want to make, do the 5 open houses you didn't want to do, or whatever it is that, those things really served us. But sometimes that hustle can lead to burnout. And, some of those things that really served us early on, if we don't broaden the lens that we're looking through, or at least question what we're seeing through that lens, then we can find ourselves stuck and find ourselves unable to see the bigger picture. So thinking about this lens, like thinking I have to do everything myself, so that independence that we talked about early on can become isolation. Nobody is coming to help me. So once with self-reliance then becomes a wall where we're not open to others and working with others and letting people help us. If I slow down, everything falls apart. So persistence that we had that served us once can then become paralysis, right? And then we freeze and we can't move forward. Security must come before everything else. So then the caution and the carefulness that we had actually becomes this cage. So I want to do a little object lesson here. I was watching Patch Adams over the weekend, and this little object lesson stood out to me. So I want everybody to take your right hand and hold up 4 fingers, put it right in front of your face. Okay, only look at your fingers. On the count of 3, I want you to tell me how many fingers you see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Does everyone see 4? Okay. Let's do that one more time. Only look at your fingers on the count of 3. Tell me how many fingers you see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Keep your fingers up. Don't change your fingers, okay? Look past your fingers. I want everybody to look at me. So look past your fingers and focus on me. If you can't see me very well, find something else in the room where you're looking past your fingers and you're looking at that thing. So I'm looking at Jordana. I'm looking past my fingers. On the count of 3, tell me how many fingers you see. 1, 2, 3, 7. Okay, did the fingers change? Did what was in front of your face change?
Yes. Yes, it did.
But did the actual fingers change?
No, no.
No. Right? So the amount of fingers or what's in front of my face did not change. What did change?
Perspective.
The focus, the perspective, right? So how you were seeing things changed. So what a simple thing just to think about if we can look beyond the problem. So think of our fingers as the problem. The problem didn't change, but the way I was viewing it and what I was able to see just because I'm looking beyond that problem did change, right? So that was something impactful for me. It was a funny thing. So I was like, how can I, and you're trying to put something that you're thinking about into words, just that little object lesson, and just how powerful our brains are. If we can just change that perspective and we can look beyond the problem, how we're able to see things that we couldn't see before. And so I want to share a little bit more about my story too. Like I said, I met my husband. We've now been together 27 years, married 24 years. We have 4 kids. And we were building this really beautiful life together, right? This life that I was so grateful for that I couldn't imagine ever having. And, had a good marriage, raising a cute little family. And my husband had always been a brick mason by trade. After I had my daughter, I attempted to go to Young Mothers High School. That didn't work out, working full time. So I did get my GED. And then I did get an associate's degree, became a medical assistant. And my husband was a brick mason, and he decided to go out on his own. And we started a construction company. So I'd been working as a medical assistant. I'd even gotten to the point where I didn't have to work full time anymore, which was such a gift to me. And my husband was working his butt off, and I was helping at home, doing the books and payroll and things like that. And then 2008 hit. We were having our youngest daughter, so pregnant at the time, and we completely lost our business. So, we made sure that the guys got paid, made payroll, but ended up with we still owed the payroll taxes. We hadn't paid ourselves and lost the business. And so I had kind of shifted in some ways to this entrepreneurial mindset, like we're building a business. I never imagined building a business, and doing pretty well, better than I imagined doing, coming from where I came from. And then we lost our business, and I slid right back into this survival mode, right? My daughter was a month old, and I'm like, I got to go back to work. I'm going to go get this job, and I'm going to work graveyard so we don't have to have a babysitter. And so I'm working as a phlebotomist at the hospital overnight. And it was just right back into just, you do what you got to do, right? So it served me, but it was, my mindset, it was just slipping back into that scarcity mindset, and not being able to see the bigger picture again is such a scary place to be. And it's crazy how quickly we go back there sometimes, right? I do that today still. The first 6 months of this year, I didn't close a third of the deals that I want to close this year, or even half of them. And so it's really easy to slip back into that scarcity mindset and not be able to see the bigger picture, and then also have just this fear base set back in. If you guys will, you've got your little handout here. And we'll stop right there on my story a little bit, just we kind of slipped back into this survival, just the feeling of having to start all over again. But if you'll look at question 1, and I'll just read it. And if you want to write something down real quick, or if there's something you're willing to share right here, and then we're going to come back to this one in a minute. Are we on time? Okay, I'll get moving. But examining your lens. So what belief do you hold so often that it feels like a fact? So that can be something in your business. That can be something in your personal life. Just think of something that you maybe hold on to that's maybe this constant repeating thought. And it feels like a fact to you. So just to give you an example, like one thing I think a lot of us think of a lot of times either in business or at home as a mom or a dad, any sort of partnership is like sometimes we have the thought like, I have to do it all by myself. You know, nobody's going to do it right. I just have to do it all by myself. Like I just use that as an example. And we'll kind of come back to that in a minute because we're going to work that backwards together. Okay, so we talked a little bit already about why we keep slipping back. Most people think growth is a permanent promotion. It is not. Business gets hard, markets shift, relationships struggle, finances tighten. Life just happens, right? Life invites us back into survival. And that's the easiest thing to do, right? Because that's what feels natural. You don't have to work at that. You don't have to work at being in survival mode. Like that's automatic. So under pressure, we tend to not rise to our intentions. We return to our conditioning. And I think just being very self-aware of that can be helpful. Yeah, I talked a little bit about my story there. Let's just go ahead and I'm going to go. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. This is, really kind of what I was getting at as far as my topic. So looking at kind of the difference. So survival asks, what happens to me? So we're reactive, we're protective, and we're waiting for our circumstances to change. While an entrepreneur asks, what can I create? We're proactive, intentional, we're building, we're solving, creating opportunity. That sounds like where I want to be, right? Like that sounds like a good place to be rather than being acted upon, we're acting in our lives. So just think about some of those things that you've built or you've been able to rise above because you have maybe refused to stay in that survival mode. You've decided to look past the problem or what's in front of your face and have a bigger vision so that you could work towards something bigger. So just kind of keep that in mind. And two, with that, look at question number 2 on your page. So a survival superpower. Think of traits that helped you survive hard times, but how are some of those same traits showing up as limits today? So think about that, and hopefully you all just take time to do this a little bit later too. But if you think of anything that you want to share while we're going along, then please do. But once we move, like we're in that creative space, right? We're all entrepreneurs here. We're all here because we have been able to see at least some portion of this bigger picture for our lives, right? So that's why you're here, and that's why you're doing what you're doing. But we have ceilings even in entrepreneurship. So success alone is not the destination. The entrepreneur often becomes trapped by the very traits that build their business. Achievement, productivity, control, self-reliance. What comes naturally eventually creates a ceiling. So while the goal was to get to being an entrepreneur, like some of those same traits carry over and then actually limit us, right? The beliefs that got us here may not take us where we're going. So the question is no longer, am I successful? Sorry, you can't really see that. It's, am I growing? And what comes naturally does eventually create a ceiling. Oh, and I wish I had a really good Hulk Hogan impression, but I don't. So, just go. I'm really bad at all impressions. So Hulk Hogan says, people say the sky's the limit. The sky's just another floor. brother. So think of those things, right? When we've reached some goals and then we're like, that's just another floor. That's a springboard for us, right? When we reach another part of life. But at the time, it feels like such a limit, right? So even just that mindset shift, like, okay, we have this one limit that I've got to figure out how to break through. But once I figure out how to break through, how do I use that as a springboard to go even further? So think about that. You have question 3 on your handout there too. So just survival versus entrepreneur mindset. So once again, just going from that reactive, what happens to me, to what can I create? But where are you still asking the survival question when you could be asking the entrepreneur one? So something for you to think about. Okay, so this is one thing. I have listened to the One Thing podcast with Nir Eyal like 15 times. I'm like halfway through his book, Beyond Belief. I highly recommend those. And maybe it's just for me. Maybe it's just what I needed in this last 6 months. But this has been super helpful for me, whether it's been like a roadblock in my business or even more so in some like difficult relationships. Sorry, I'm so into some difficult relationships and like, why you're not seeing eye to eye and where you're so far on the, different page as somebody you care about so much. And this is something that's been really helpful for me. And guess what? It's not changing how the other person sees things. It's changing how I'm seeing things. And I'm able to see a bigger picture and maybe even some paths forward. So Nir Eyal, he focuses on this in his book and talks about beliefs are tools, not truths. But beliefs change our behaviors, and then behaviors drive the results, right? So maybe go back to that first question. What belief do you hold so often that it feels like a fact, not a choice? And so maybe we can work through that together real quick. I have a couple generic examples, but is there anyone that wants to share something that, like, what's a belief, maybe a simple belief in your business or personal life that you hold on to that we can maybe question a little bit? Okay, so we're going to work through this together. So asking yourself, so things don't come easy for me. Okay, is that true? And just answer me just as brutally honest and just the first thought, like, so is that true? Okay, so yes, otherwise you wouldn't be thinking it, right? Like, what's that? Yes, and Nir Eyal quotes him in this. So yes, that's true. So next question, is that absolutely true? If we look at the facts, is that absolutely true? 100%. Most of the time. Okay, but you're leaving space, like it's not always true, right? Okay, who are you when you believe that? I'd like for university, so come easier for me, so what will happen? Yeah. And is that something you want to believe? Is that who you want to be? Okay. And who would you be without that belief? Perfect. Okay. And so when the belief of things don't come easy for me, we know it's not 100% true. So could the exact opposite be true? Is there a possibility? Especially with every connection, right? Yes. So rather than seeing it, like, no, actually, I can take that. I'm getting started in real estate. I don't have to have that thing. I think it's easy the opposite. It becomes super easy for me. I've already done all the work for 9 years now. All the relationships I built with last time. Yeah. I hope that wasn't me falling off the wall while I'm teaching.
That's how we come to falling in love.
I love it. So was that helpful to just talk through that? And are you able to maybe like see beyond the four fingers a little bit more?
Yeah.
Yes. But just blind positivity, right? Without, right? Does that, maybe not get us quite where we need to be? But it's a start, right? Because we're looking beyond, we're choosing to see the broader picture. So thank you for letting us work through that. And so I would just 100% encourage everybody to use your paper here. You'll have the slides tomorrow, and asking yourself those questions and working through your insert. Here we go. So that's the questions that you can ask yourself. And this is something I am doing a lot lately. Like I said, there's, when there's something that, I don't see eye to eye on, or I have a really hard time understanding somebody else's perspective, or, I just see it so differently. Instead of challenging their beliefs, I'm able to challenge my beliefs. And then especially when I first started real estate, thinking about like purpose, moving to purposeful, that was so huge to me still. I thought like that meant I had to make millions of dollars and start a nonprofit organization and feed the hungry and the poor and, give back to my community in these huge ways that just didn't seem possible. But my mindset around that has changed too. So sometimes, So purpose asks, who am I becoming? Who am I serving? And what legacy am I creating? We talked about that. And then sometimes, and more so in my case, purpose is more breaking generational cycles, creating a stable home, giving my children a different starting point. And purpose is not about perfection, it's about direction. And to get there, I'm having to ask myself the questions: what beliefs must I release? What beliefs must I adopt? And what perspective will I practice? And coming back to just remembering that the beliefs that built you may have served you well. That starting in real estate, I was like, nobody's going to work harder than me. Being pregnant at 17 and on my own, of course I was gonna give my daughter the best life that I possibly could, and nothing was going to stop me. And those beliefs have served me, but I also have to have and be open to, independence doesn't have to mean doing it all on my own. And it doesn't mean, having to constantly be in this hustle, survival, scarcity mode. Being able to think of abundance, think of the vision for my future and my family and my business. So those are the things that I would ask you all to consider too, whether it's something in your personal life or your business, somewhere where you're ready to grow and take that next step. I would encourage you to look at your beliefs, question them, and see what you can let go of so that you can make space for something bigger and better. And thank you. That's what I got.
Awesome. Thank you, Tana.
You.
Phenomenal. One, thank you again for our lunch sponsor. Just a reminder, we will not have team meeting next Tuesday. So enjoy the 4th, have a fun weekend with the family, stay safe, and we will love to see you in 2 weeks. We'll be back in 2 weeks for team meeting. Okay, have a great week.